If you want to see desperate, look no further than what Republicans just did in the House as it relates to Kamala Harris. Republican Congressman Andy Ogles has introduced articles of impeachment against the vice president. There are 2 articles in total. One is a reintroduction of an article that was filed in June of 2023 against her, which focused on immigration, the usual boogeyman for Republicans. And then a new article which claims that Harris covered up Biden's mental well-being, constituting a breach of public trust. Quote, Kamala Devi Harris has knowingly misled the people of the United States and the Congress of the United States, principally to obfuscate the physical and cognitive well-being of the President of the United States, Joe Biden. So let's start off with the old article on the border. This comes at an especially inopportune moment for Republicans, considering border crossings right now are at their lowest point in Biden's entire presidency, with only 83,000 arrests in June alone. So while Republicans are desperately trying to gin up hysteria about the border per usual, their narrative doesn't comport in the slightest with reality. Consider too, there is one reason and one alone why there is not a long-standing, permanent solution at the border, and that's because Donald Trump made sure that no Republicans would vote for the border bill that was negotiated by conservative Republican Senator James Lankford. That border bill offered zero comprehensive immigration reform, which is historically the sole condition for Democratic approval. But this time, Democrats were willing to offer only border security in exchange for Ukraine aid. And guess what? They passed Ukraine aid anyway, meaning the border bill would have zero downside for Republicans, a border bill solely predicated on border security with no concessions whatsoever. And yet, what did Republicans do? They listened to Trump. They listened to him because he demanded that nothing happen on the border because he wanted to preserve the problem to campaign on. And lo and behold, here we are during campaign season, and Republicans have dutifully introduced articles of impeachment on, you guessed it, the border, like clockwork. And just as a quick aside, all this is indicative of a political party that is here for nothing other than fucking around. They've got solutions right in front of their faces, and yet they refuse to accept them because their goal is not governing, it's not helping their constituents, it's not even solving problems that they themselves fearmonger about on a daily basis, like the border. They are here to do whatever they can to break things expressly so that they can point to the thing that they just broke as evidence that the Democrats can't govern. But the only party that isn't capable of governing is the GOP, and that is on full display right here. As for the second article, that Harris covered up Biden's mental well-being, let's consider this apparent ploy that was carried out by the evil communist Marxist Democrats. Apparently, the entire Democratic Party knew exactly what Biden's mental state was, but they wanted to keep it a secret. And so in order to do that, the Biden campaign decided, you know what we should do? We should demand the earliest ever debate in June, broadcast to 60 million people in this country, even though we're all in on this big secret to keep Biden hiding. Please, someone, explain to me how that makes sense. If there really was some big conspiracy to hide Joe Biden's mental state from the American public, then why was it Biden's campaign that insisted on a June debate in front of the biggest TV audience imaginable? I mean, dear God, just try to use at least an ounce of logic. In fact, the utter lack of any reason whatsoever was put on full display by Democratic Congressman Scanlon in responding to the articles of impeachment here.
The MAGA majority has called an emergency hearing to pass a do-nothing resolution to condemn the vice president for her alleged failings on a job that never existed. But more on that job later. So we have to note right up front that the resolution before us was filed and given emergency status only after President Biden announced that he was withdrawing from the presidential race and after Vice President Harris became the presumptive nominee. So I'll tell you what the emergency is. The emergency is that House Republicans have wasted a year and a half using congressional resources to attack and investigate President Biden and his family to help the former president's campaign for revenge. And not only did those investigations come up empty, but now Biden's not the candidate. I'll tell you what the emergency is. House Republicans have wasted a year and a half saying the most important issue in America is a crisis at the southern border. But when they were presented with a bipartisan immigration deal, they turned it down. And when Republicans were presented with a bipartisan border security funding package, they turned it down. So let me tell you, excuse me? Thank you. So I'll tell you what the emergency is. Border crossings are down 54% from the statistics that are included in this sham resolution. I'll tell you what the emergency is. They've been trying to take down President Biden for being old, and now their candidate is the old one. I'll tell you what the emergency is. Vice President Harris The presumptive Democratic nominee and the person they're trying to smear today has a history of prosecuting criminals, and you know the rest. So this emergency meeting is nothing more than a campaign hit job against Vice President Harris. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. This resolution has no valid legislative purpose. It doesn't do anything at all about the border. It just uses the House of Representatives as a messaging apparatus for Donald Trump's presidential campaign, and it gives every member of the Republican conference an opportunity to bash the presumptive Democratic nominee for president, Vice President Kamala Harris. Americans are sick of this nonsense.
In other words, this whole thing is a sham, which, in fairness, is effectively the only thing that Republicans are actually good at these days. And let's be clear, all of these stunts are to compensate for one thing. They are scared. They are so utterly incapable of simply running a fair race that they need to try everything they can to gain an unfair advantage. You don't see Kamala trying to sue anyone or impeach anyone. She's just campaigning. And yet Republicans are so scared of actually facing the voters in a fair fight that all their energy goes into these stunts. Tell you what, if they spent even a tenth of the amount of time governing as they do drafting lawsuits and articles of impeachment and ginning up bogus investigations that last years and amount to exactly nothing, they might actually have something to show for their constituents for their time in office. Instead, they can show their constituents exactly nothing. I mean, seriously, there is no legislation, nothing on healthcare, nothing for jobs, nothing on gun safety or climate or manufacturing. The GOP is in office to build their brands and act like clowns to secure a booking on Fox News that night. You've heard the right complain about government waste. I think we just found the biggest source of it. I mean, let's be real. I work hard, I pay my taxes, and just like all of you, I want to know that my tax dollars are not being squandered. But that is exactly what's happening when Republicans take control of any branch of government. All they have to show for themselves in this Congress is a 16-month investigation into Hunter Biden, a private citizen that was supposed to show some grand pay-for-play scheme, and yet after a year and a half, they managed to pin their hopes on one witness who would ultimately get indicted for lying to the FBI because he was a Russian plant. You could not find a more pathetic end to what was an already pathetic effort in the first place. These are fundamentally unserious people who are not qualified to run a lemonade stand, much less any branch of the US government. So as far as the articles of impeachment are concerned, they are going nowhere. The border is more secure now than at any other point in years, and that's no thanks, by the way, to Republicans. And this nonsense about Biden's mental state sounds like it was cooked up in the comment section of a Marjorie Taylor Greene live stream. Neither of these are impeachable, they are not high crimes or misdemeanors, and frankly, they're not worth the paper that they're printed on. If Republicans are that afraid that they're going to lose, that they're now trying to impeach Kamala Harris, perhaps I can offer a little bit of free advice. Stop fucking around and perhaps consider governing, and then the American people would be more likely to vote for you than they are right now. Then again, I suppose that's a fool's errand, considering when you elect clowns, you can expect a circus. I've got a really exciting announcement. I've written a book. It's called Shameless. This book explores how Republicans have exploited their historical branding while attacking our democracy, how the media has proven itself a willful participant, and how Democrats can learn from this to rebalance the political scales and save our democracy. It has been a lifelong dream of mine to write my own book, and so I'd like to ask you to pre-order it by clicking the link right here on the screen. And if you buy within this pre-order period, your book is going to come with a signed nameplate. As you know, I've never had a single sponsor on my channel. I don't ask for money or anything like that, but if you're looking for a way to support me, this is hands down the best way to do it. So again, follow the link right here on the screen, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for pre-ordering Shameless. And as always, make sure to subscribe to see more of my content.